Hi, this is Carson with Troy, and I have with me fantasy author Ben Wolf. Now, Ben, I appreciate you getting on with me today. Some of your series include Blood Mercenaries, Call of Ancient Light, um, Dino Adventures, Santa Claus Saves Christmas, and others. Appreciate you getting on with me this morning. Ben, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me, Carson. My name is Ben Wolf. Like you said, I'm a fantasy author. I've also got sci-fi, some horror, children's books, young adult, Western. I've got a vampire novel because why not? And actually, my debut graphic novel launches on June 28th at an event that I'm going to called Planet FunkCon in Davenport, Iowa. So I'm adding a very visual medium to my list of published works as well.
That's awesome. Congratulations on the
Thank you.
upcoming graphic novel. Now, what motivates you to write in all these different genres?
Motivation, I don't know if that's exactly the right word for it. It's more of a compulsion than anything. I have story ideas just across multiple types of worlds and genres and different vibes and feels for the different stories that I write because that's just how they come to me. And sometimes certain stories, I'm sure you and some of your listeners understand, they don't always work for just fantasy or they don't always work for just sci-fi. And so you need to take it a different direction in order to get the story to work the way it needs to work. So it's cohesive and coherent and entertaining for the reader. So I like to play around in different genres for those reasons. And also, I do tend to get bored just writing the same thing over and over and over again. It has to be something pretty crazy and pretty out there for me to want to write the same thing unendingly. And so far, I haven't found that. And I think that's part of why I've explored all these other genres as well, because maybe at some point I'll stumble onto something that keeps me engaged on a level where I can just write it forever. But so far, that hasn't happened.
Well, let's talk about your idea creation. Like, when does a seed, come to fruition? Like, what's your process to be like, okay, this is good enough to where I can pursue it?
That's a great question. It's different for every series. And most writers who have published any number of especially a large number of books, but really anyone who publishes any single book even comes to understand this at least to a degree. You have to really be diligent and disciplined about getting the work done. And for me, I can be diligent and disciplined about a story idea, but that doesn't mean that I'm fully ready to write that story. For example, I'm working on the first book in a new series, and I've been off and on that book for the last 11, almost 12 years at this point, and it still is, I'm 100,000 words in to the first book, and it's lit RPG, and it's a big sprawling thing. So it's not all that to say, it's not ready yet for me to publish it. It's not ready for me to take it to the next step because I'm still working on all the development for it. But then there's other series where the Santa Saves Christmas series is a good example of this. I had written the first one and it was just something goofy and fun and I was enjoying it. And then when it came time to really get serious about it, then I rewrote it and then wrote the second two in the series to make it a trilogy within 6 months of rewriting the first one. So sometimes it's very fast, sometimes it's not very fast. But from the idea to finished product, it can take me anywhere from I think my longest is currently the one that I'm working on is going on 12 years, but usually it takes me a long time to get that first book right. But once that's right, then the subsequent books I can do much quicker. You mentioned the Blood Mercenary series. That's another good example. That one, the idea had been germinating in my head for years, a long, long time. I don't know exactly how long, but it took me a couple years to get through the first book, which is book zero, and it's four origin stories, one for each of the four main characters. But then writing book one, I did that in 34 days. And then obviously you have edits and stuff like that afterward. But uh, the other two books I wrote within less than a year of completing book one to make it a tetralogy, which is four books. So it it uh, it, it kind of depends, right? If it's not the first book in a series, I can usually go pretty quickly. If it's not, or if it is the first book, then it definitely does take me longer.
Now, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming, now this is a generalization
Sure.
because, I want to be a writer and whatnot, but like I'm assuming you have lots of ideas of different things that you maybe want to pursue one day. When you're going through your list of ideas, um, what do you look for to stick out to say, okay, this is the type of idea that I want to pursue versus another one?
That's a great question as well. Usually I really try to, this is going to sound almost metaphysical and goofy and certainly not scientific, we'll put it that way, but I try to listen to what is in my heart and what is really pulling at my heart. Because I've found that the stories that I write or am working on, they will they will pull on my heart, and as a result of them pulling on my heart pulls on my brain and says, "Hey, you should write this." So for me, being in tune with myself and having an understanding of who I am and what my goals are and just what stories are calling to me, begging to be made, those are the ones that tend to get my attention. If I'm working on a story and it stops calling on me or stops pulling at me in that way, that doesn't mean that I give it up per se, because I am a completionist in that regard. I do want to finish what I start, unless it's really bad, and then I'm okay with giving it up. But um, if it's really pulling at me and it stops, then I usually do still try to finish it. But mostly what I've found is that if a story's pulling on me significantly enough, then it's just something I'm going to finish anyway. So I don't know if that's the answer that you were expecting, Carson, but that's kind of how it works for me. I really try to make sure that I'm putting my attention, my limited attention and my limited time into the stories that are pulling at my heart, pulling at the core of who I am. And that usually is a really solid indication of, yes, I should be working on this particular project.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. I like that. Being able to go kind of with your inner gut and developing the story that kind of is reaching you at that moment. Now, Ben, what advice would you give somebody who is kind of going through this process and they get to that point where they're stuck, they're like, this is horrible, and how do you identify like what's horrible, what's not, um, and develop that, like I said, motivation, you said compulsion to keep going.
That's a really, really, really good question as well. I, for me, I'm at a different point than a lot of other authors are, especially beginning authors. I'm going to be 16 years into my career as of September of this year. So
Congratulations.
I think it's safe to say I'm no longer a beginner. Um, I won't go so far as to claim that I've mastered anything per se, but I will say that I have experience in a lot of areas. So that's the foundation by which I'm going to answer your question. If I were a newer writer, a beginning writer, or even an intermediate who's still really trying to find their way, the advice I would give would be rely on outside help until you no longer need it. And even that is sort of a misleading thing to say because we always need some outside help. That's the nature of our business. We are writing stuff for other people to read. And so as part of writing stuff for other people to read, we need to have other people read it before we put it out to the entire world. And so having savvy beta readers, having a good editor is amazing. Someone who can look at your stuff and identify what's wrong, whether you're paying them or whether or not, that is crucial to ensuring quality control and making sure that you're hitting audience expectations. So having work on building that sort of support structure even now. If you haven't already started, there's no better time. Start trying to acquire good beta readers, start trying to find a good editor who can help you grow to the next level in your career. Start reading your own reviews on Amazon. I know a lot of authors say don't do that. If it's going to debilitate you, then yes, don't read it. But if you can look at it and say, okay, they were being critical, but maybe there's something to that, then it actually can be helpful uh, to identify like what do I need to do differently to better hit my target audience. And obviously, if someone's just being mean in a review, ignore it. But I would say have that external help uh, up to a point. Eventually, what I've noticed for me is that my instincts have honed to the point where I usually know what I need to do next in a story. I usually can tell what I need to fix in order to make the story work the way that it should work. But also, I've got 16 years of experience at this point in being in this industry and working on books off and on those 16 years. I have 28 books out now, and my 29th comes out next month. So, again, not a beginner, but also I wouldn't call myself a master of anything. But I have learned over time how to identify the things that I need to improve in my own work a little bit more easily than I did when I was a beginner. I should say a lot more easily. But even so, like we just discussed, it is super, super important to have someone you can trust, someone who knows what they're doing, give you outside feedback as well, because you'll just never catch everything in your own work.
No, that's great advice. And you said like building a support network, editor, beta readers. Do you have any advice on where to find good editors? Because just like anything else, like online, there's lots of varying degrees of good. Um, and how would you develop if you had to start from scratch? So granted, you're 16 years into it. If you had to start over today, how would you build that association with other beta readers or with your beta readers?
If I were starting over, what I would do is try to connect with authors who are writing in the genre that I want to write in, and I would ask them, hey, who do you use as an editor for the editor piece of your question? Most authors, as long as you can actually get them to respond, because some of them are tragically very introverted and some of them are tragically very busy or disinterested in talking to their fans. But if you can actually get an author that you admire to respond to you, they will probably sing the praises of their editor. That's been my experience as well. I used to do a lot of freelance editing, and so my clients would refer people to me and even continue to do so, even though I'm not really doing much editing anymore. And so getting a referral from someone who's doing what you want to do would be my first piece of advice. And then the same thing kind of goes for beta readers as well. Authors are sheltered people in a lot of ways. We sit at our computers, we write books. It's very solitary for a lot of the time. And so having a reader that wants to engage with us, especially a reader who is uh, a fan of our work and wants to maybe also try to do their own thing, it's kind of flattering. And we authors are humans just like anyone else. A little bit of flattery can go a long way. And so if you're asking smart questions like, do you have any readers you can recommend, or do you have any resources for finding beta readers that you can recommend in this genre specifically that you're writing in? And by the way, I love your books and you're amazing. You're more likely to get a good response from them. And there are beta readers out there I've found who uh, they're almost employed by authors specifically to do beta reading. Now, employed is sometimes it implies a payment, sometimes it doesn't. In this case, I would think most beta readers are not employed. They just get the benefit of getting to read the books before anyone else, and that's enough. But finding those readers, the best way I've found it is to use other authors as a resource for that. And then later on in your career, as you've been writing more books and developing a fan base, those beta readers sometimes make themselves known to you from your own audience. And you can actually put out a call to them through your newsletter or through your social media. I would, if you have a newsletter, which I do recommend, I would ask on the newsletter first because it's more of an exclusive club than just kind of posting publicly on Facebook or some other social media. And you tend to get better results from people who are dedicated enough to not only read and buy your work, but who sign up for your newsletter and follow you and the things that you're doing. So, in summary, if I can go back, talk to other authors, get their recommendations for editors and potential beta readers. And then once you have a fan base, then you can rely on your fan base to acquire more beta readers as well. Getting a lot of eyes on your work can be a good thing. Um, for me, I usually rely on two or three beta readers, but they're just really savvy. And so I feel like I don't have to get 10 or 20 people beta reading the thing because I know I've got two or three who are reliable and they will read it every time and they will give me good feedback every time. So don't necessarily mistake quantity for quality or vice versa. If you can find some really quality people, you don't necessarily need to have too many voices. The old adage, too many cooks in the kitchen, comes to mind. If you can just get a few who are really solid, oftentimes that can be enough.
Awesome. That's great advice. Maybe on that front for finding beta readers, catching, throwing a wide net out there, and then as you go on, narrow it down to the
Yes.
true beta readers, so to speak. No,
Yeah,
that's great advice. Um, so when you create your worlds, your fantasy worlds, it has to be rich and immersive. Like you have to be able to fill it. How do you approach world building in a way that supports the story and the pacing without overwhelming the reader?
great question. You have some really excellent questions for this interview. I appreciate that you've done your homework. Um, this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart because I feel like I can't read a lot of traditional fantasy stuff because my attention span is regrettably too short. So, listening to some of the greats of our time or reading some of the greats of our time describing a feast in endless detail or uh, the color of a single leaf in the forest or on the forest floor is wonderful and beautiful and poetic and awesome, but also it's like get on with the story, please, for those of us who have shorter attention spans. And I write very much that way. I try to keep the story moving. So as I'm doing my world building, I found the most effective way to do that is uh, a two-pronged approach. I do as much as I can on the front end so I can at least have a base understanding of the world. And you can do that in any number of ways, whatever works for you. Just get it onto into your story Bible, into some sort of separate document. That's totally fine. But then while I'm doing the writing, I sort of let the story world unfold before me through the eyes of whichever point of view character that I'm writing. And so as that character experiences the world, not only am I writing the story and making progress in the book, but I'm also then making important notes in that story Bible document as well to ensure that anything and everything that I'm writing down gets captured for easy reference later on. So that would be my approach. That's my recommended approach. Your mileage may vary, your listeners' mileage may vary, but get as much down on the front end as you can, and then uh, let us experience, like literally experience the story world through the point of view characters, point of view, and their five senses and all that fun stuff. And then again, keep the story moving as well. You can experience a lot of story world while your character is on the go in the mix and having things happen to them and around them because they're everything that's happening to them is happening in their story world as well. So it's important for me anyway to keep the story moving while I'm building the world.
I like that. That's great advice. So your story Bible, when you begin a story, how much do you plan out beforehand before you start, or is it kind of like a living document as you're both writing and adding to the world?
It's a both and in that circumstance. I do as much as I can on the front end to make sure that I have a base understanding of the world, which I said earlier. I try to develop the characters, especially at least my main characters, my protagonists, my antagonists, my sidekicks, anyone who's like really important. I do try to figure out who they are pretty early on in the process because I found that understanding the characters helps me understand the story world because understanding the characters helps me understand how they react to the story world. And the characters, authors say this all the time, and it's a weird thing to think about because I know it's all coming from my head. It just doesn't always seem like it. Authors do tend to have a mind of their, excuse me, characters tend to have a mind of their own, and they kind of do things that are surprising. And you, as the author, are the god of your story world, so you get to decide if you let it fly or not. Most of the time, I let it fly because I feel like, well, if that's interesting and fun, then maybe there's a reason for it, and maybe it'll come back later on in the story and serve the story, as opposed to me trying to limit too much that can maybe stifle my creativity. And so I found that allowing the characters to dictate how things go and what we see and where we visit and what they interact with, that is super helpful in terms of building the story world. So on the front end, I try to figure out as much of the very, very basic stuff as I can. Like, is it sci-fi? Is it fantasy? Are we on other planets? Is it a different realm? Are there dragons there? That's one of the big questions. You always got to figure out, are there dragons on this world? Um, what other animals are there? You may be aware of this, Carson, but I have a book called Power Author, and it's about how to create a story Bible. And so I follow my own structure in that. I list all the different areas and I try to hit as many of those high points as I can just to kind of help me conceptualize the world. But then as I'm going through the actual book, the story Bible does become a living document in that regard because I'm constantly adding to it, constantly putting more and more in there as a reference point for future books in the series because I almost exclusively am writing in series at this point.
Awesome. No, that's great advice. And you can pick up that book on your website, right?
Yep,
Somebody wants
on the
to copy it
website, on
on
Amazon,
Amazon, wherever books are
and
sold,
it's
basically.
I've got two power author books. One is yellow, one is blue. The blue one is about how to do live events. The yellow one is the story Bible one. And so if you have a bunch of books out and you want to make some money and make some fans at live events, check out the blue one. If you're not quite at that point and you'd like to get more help with craft, the yellow one about story Bible is the way to go.
Awesome. Yeah, I did see that on your website, so I was going to bring
Yeah,
it up a little bit later, but we took care of it now, so awesome.
thank you.
Now you write for both adult and younger audiences.
Mhm.
How does your creative process shift, if it does, when writing to middle grade young adult compared to adult epic fantasy?
I wouldn't say that my creative process shifts very much, but I am more aware. I shouldn't say I'm more aware. I would say that my awareness of what audience I'm writing for is always at the forefront, regardless of what project it is. So it could be young adults, it could be kids, it could be a sci-fi horror, and I'm thinking about what does my audience expect. And so in terms of the creative process, most of the things that I do are the same, except for that one point. I'm thinking of, well, is this appropriate for a kid? Is this appropriate for YA? Am I taking it far enough for an audience that wants a horror novel? So it's mostly just trying to keep audience expectations in mind and then tailoring my approach, tailoring my creativity and my storytelling, the language that I'm using, the things that are happening in the story that I allow to happen in the story are very different based on the target audience.
No, that's awesome. Now you mentioned something before, and I meant to bring it up a little bit ago, but um, writers have said this to me before, and I've had experience with this as well. But if you talk to a non-writer, they don't understand this at all. And it's the characters doing whatever they want.
Yep.
Now, you said that you let them pursue that, whatever, you write something, you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Let's see where it goes. What's the line for you to where like, okay, this is getting off track. I need to either stop it or like reel it in a little bit, or how can I bring it back to the story to end up where I want it to end up?
So this is a great question, and it's an important question. Part of my answer is probably going to make some of your readers a little bit upset, or your listeners a little bit upset, if they're not too deep into their careers. But a lot of that comes with time and experience. You get a sense of how much is too much, how far is too far in letting your characters run wild. And so as you develop your skills and develop your craft of writing, you tend to get a sense for how much is too much and how much is appropriate and how much is great for just adding a fun little side quest or a subplot or whatever. So again, some of it comes with experience, but for those of us who are newer, my advice would be keep your end goal in mind. That and as I said in the previous conversation, keep your target audience in mind too. If you keep your end goal in mind and if you keep your target audience in mind, and I guess the third thing would be keep your pacing in mind, you want to make sure that anything that you're allowing the characters to do that is maybe off script, if it allows you to develop their character and if they're an important character especially, then it makes sense. If it's a minor character or like maybe they're just in the one scene and they're doing some really cool and interesting things, then that can be a signal to you that, well, maybe this character needs to show up again if they're that interesting to you. Or maybe it's a sign that this character may cause problems, and so maybe we definitely never need to see them again. I've kind of had both happen. But if a character does something that surprises you, especially if they're a minor character, let that happen because it'll make that character seem more real and it'll make your writing feel more authentic. And again, especially if they're a major or an important character and they do something that surprises you, it's kind of the same thing, only it's more important because we're going to be with that character for longer. So you do have more time to explore it. You don't necessarily have to explore this entire personality quirk all in a sequence of thick, unruly paragraphs all at once. You can have this be a character trait that you explore over the course of the entire book, or over a chapter, or over several books. And so you've got some freedom there. Experience is just super, super important with this question. I'll share a fun story along these lines. In my Call of Ancient Light series, this actually happened twice. I won't name the character in case anybody chooses to read it, but I had a character in the second book who I brought in and was like, "You're going to do this thing, and this thing is all you're going to do." And then the character says, "Nope, I'm coming with you on the rest of the journey." I said, "No, you're not. You're going to do this thing, and then you're going to stay home." And the character was adamant, "No, no, no, I have to come along because of XYZ reason." And I said, "Okay, you can come along, but you will die if you come along." And the character said, "I don't care. I'm coming along anyway." And sure enough, by the end of the second book, that character is dead. Again, I'm not going to give you any more information about it, but sometimes in order to serve the overall narrative, you do have to put in some guardrails for your characters. They can do interesting things, they can be compelling and fun and awesome and cool, but sometimes there's a price to be paid for your characters who decide to be larger than life and larger than maybe you initially intended them to be. So keep that in mind as well. When in doubt, you can always kill the guy or girl.
That's awesome. That's great advice. Um, in a crowded fantasy market, how do you distinguish your voice and stories, and what would you say makes a Ben Wolf novel unmistakably yours?
I'm going to start with the last question first. What makes a Ben Wolf novel unmistakably mine is my what I've mentioned before, my pacing, especially for fantasy. I really pride myself on things being fast enough paced that people stay interested in my work the entire time. That's not to say that I skimp on description or that or character development or of any of the important stuff. I do all of those things. I just do it in such a way that the story is moving as I'm describing these things, as I'm building the world, building the characters. So that's one of the hallmarks. And then the other hallmark is everything I've written has a really solid helping of action and adventure. That's very important to me in stories. I don't get down with literary fiction. It just isn't for me. It's too slow. It doesn't hold my attention. A lot of romance. And I'm not trying to pick on other genres, certainly. I'm just sharing my preferences. Mystery can sometimes be too slow. So whatever, if I'm writing something that has romance in it, or if it's got mystery in it, I really try to, again, pacing, keep things moving, but also have there be some actual physical conflict between the characters. Because for me, that's what one of the elements that makes the story interesting is that, well, here's a person who wants to impose their will on you or on a character, and that character doesn't want that to happen. And so they come to blows over it. And describing the fight scene is not nearly as important as describing what is happening to the characters in the fight, if that makes sense. A great resource for authors that I always love to recommend for fight scenes is it's actually two books now. It's called Fight Right by Carla Hoch, Hoch. And Carla's an old friend of mine. She's also a jujitsu practitioner like me. She's a brown belt. She kicks my butt. It's fantastic. She wrote two books on writing fight scenes, and she has studied extensively medieval warfare, martial arts, sword fighting. She is just a wealth of information and knowledge. And so I know we're on a little bit of a tangent here, and I'll bring it back, I promise. But since I'm writing a lot of action and adventure, her work has been very instructive to me, and she's a fantastic resource to any author who has questions about fight scenes. I would start with her books, and then if you need to, you can reach out to her through her website, which is fightright.net or .com or .org. I think it's fightright.net, if I'm not mistaken. So check that out. But yes, the hallmarks of a Ben Wolf book are great pacing and really good action adventure. And then I would say also, as of late, ever since the Blood Mercenaries books, I really, really good, solid, realistic characters because that has become more important to me as I've developed my writing career because it was a huge weakness of mine early on in my writing career. I was getting feedback from editors and from reviewers and from folks who where I was submitting books for just any sort of feedback or awards. They were saying, "Yeah, I love the book. It was great. You did this, and this really well, but your characterization could use some work. Like didn't feel really connected to the main character in particular." So I worked very hard to get good at characterization and learn what makes characters tick. And there are a ton of excellent resources out there that authors can refer to get more into understanding their characters better. None of them are coming to mind, of course, because I'm putting myself on the spot, but um, they're out there. The end result is if you do the work and develop your skill and your craft in working on any of your weaknesses, characters included, then eventually that can end up becoming one of your strengths and one of the things that you are known for. And then if you can rehash the first part of your question, I'd love to answer that as well.
Well, you kind of answered it. It said,
Okay,
in a crowded fantasy market, how do you distinguish your voice and stories? And you very well answer that with
sure.
pacing and well-developed characters and stuff like,
Okay.
and so yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. So take me in a day in the life of Ben Wolf. You hit the convention scene. How do you balance that and writing and editing and marketing?
Great question. Sometimes I balance it really well. Other times I don't balance it very well. More to the actual spirit of your question, if it's a convention day, usually those are on weekends. Maybe you get a Thursday or a Friday in there, but usually it's pretty solidly a Saturday and or a Sunday. On those days, I wake up. If I'm already set up, then I go in and I do final last minute setup things, and then I'm on my feet, standing, smiling, engaging people who are walking by. This is where the Power Author live events book comes in handy. So if you've got books published, especially if you have several books published, especially if you have series published, that book is going to be very helpful to you if you want to try to build your audience and build your sales at live events. Highly recommend that book. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty details here. If we have specific things that come up, I'm happy to talk about them, but there's just so much, right? So I'll stick to some of the high points. I get in there, I smile, I'm personable. I want the mistake that I think a lot of authors make when you do a convention or you do a live event is, I'm here, I need to sell my books. That is the most important thing. I think that's a mistake. I think selling books is great, but I think it should be a byproduct of bonding with the people that you're talking to. And specifically, the tagline for my Power Author book about live events is bond over books. If you have a reader who's walking up and checking out your books because you've done a good job with your cover design and they're engaged, your best bet is to engage them in a conversation about what they like to read, not just, oh, here, look at this. That's sure, maybe you'll make a sale, but making a sale is not as important as making a reader and a fan for life. That is my goal when I'm going to a convention is everyone I talk to, I want to make them feel special, like they're important, like I value them, not just that I'm trying to sell books. And so again, we're talking high points here of what I would do at a convention, at a typical convention day. I really just try to make it a great experience for them. If they have a great experience and they end up liking me as a person, they're more likely to buy my books. And I know that that's the end result. And yes, obviously I want to sell books, but I do the hard work on the front end to make sure that I gain their loyalty and their trust enough to where they at least consider buying a book. And even if they don't buy a book, I still feel satisfied because I've accomplished my mission, which is to bond over books, which is to make a personal connection with someone. And then that way, even if they don't buy a book or they can't buy a book or even if they say they're not a reader, I don't feel bad about being rejected because that was never my goal in the first place. Selling the book was never my goal. It's a byproduct of doing things the right way as far as your engagement with the people who are walking up to your booth. So those are some of the things that I focus on when I'm doing a live event. During the rest of the week, that's when the real balancing act comes into play. Um, it's true that at conventions, if things are a little bit slow, I'll have my iPad on a little stand-up table, a little mini table on top of one of my other tables, so I can stand there and type out a few words, get a little bit of word count in while I'm at a convention. Sure, sometimes I do that, but most of my work on writing happens during the week. So Monday through Friday are pretty much my writing days, and that's not to say that I write every Monday through Friday every day. I wish I were that consistent. I'm just not. If and there are also some times where I'm not even in a writing season, so I may not be writing at all for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'll be working on other things. If I've just finished a book, then it's self-editing and beta readers and formatting and prepping marketing stuff, and so I may not be writing per se. I'm certainly not a big deal by anyone's stretch of the imagination, so that I don't really have a team. Like I can't like give a book to a team and say, "Here, marketing team, go prep this and get it ready for me." Nope, I do all that myself because that's where I'm at in my career. And there's no shame to that. There's nothing wrong with that. If you can afford to hire a marketing team, more power to you. For me, that's where I'm at in my career, and so those are the things that I focus on when I'm not in a writing season. And then a normal day is I wake up, I don't drink coffee because I don't like the taste and I get caffeine withdrawal headaches. So two strikes against it. There's no reason for me to do that. Usually I'll wake up, I'll have like an electrolyte drink, something that I can mix myself if I need something just to get me a little bit more awake. And then I sit down and start sifting through any emails that I might have. And once I'm done with the emails and all the nitty-gritty of day-to-day monotony, then I relax and start getting into the writing. And I'll write for anywhere from an hour or two to 3, 4 hours. Sometimes I break it up, have lunch, and then go back to the writing. Sometimes I don't. It kind of just depends on what the day throws at me. Um, Again, I wish I could be more disciplined about getting words done at certain times of the day or more consistently, having a more consistent schedule. That's just not how my life has gone recently. And I've decided not to beat myself up over it because I'm clearly doing something right because I have 28 books out. And having that perspective is harder when you're newer because you don't have 28 books out. Maybe you're working on your first one, or maybe you're working on your third or your eighth. Don't beat yourself up about it. Get the work done that you can get done and just understand that, hey, the future for me is I'm going to have a lot of books out. I'm going to have a career at this if that's your goal. If it's just a hobby, that's fine too. Having that perspective of I'm playing the long game here. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's really hard to write a book in one day. So you don't have to do that. You can write a book over the course of many days. Uh, I've written books that have taken me years. We at the beginning of this conversation, like I've been working on this current project for going on 12 years now, and it's frustrating at times, but other times it's rewarding and fulfilling and fantastic. And as anyone who's finished a book and published a book knows, when that first box of books that you've ordered from your printer shows up at your house and you open it and you see your work there and your cool cover that someone else designed for you because you're not a professional artist and you're smart and you hired someone. Uh, it's a beautiful, beautiful moment, and it makes all of the struggle and the lack of discipline and anything else that you've been grappling with worth it at the end of the day. So that's probably more than what we originally asked for in the question, but that's where we ended up.
I'm gonna ask a follow-up question on,
Yeah.
your daily. You say you write, you sit down and write for a couple hours. Is that what you do? Let's say ideally, like, do you do like for a set time, or do you like go for a word count?
Usually I go for word count goals. With my more recent this year, we'll say this year, I've been less stringent about like I need to hit X number of words per day. It's more been just because this year has just been a very, very busy year. I meant it to be a less busy year, but it seems like every year it just gets busier and busier for X, Y, and Z reasons. So it's not a set word count anymore. It's just let's get as many words as I can. And again, a lot of this comes with the experience and the maturity of having done this for so many years that I don't have to beat myself up if I don't hit 3,000 words a day or 1,000 words a day or even 500 words a day. If I have any sort of bar at all, it's the Jerry Seinfeld bar, which is write 100 words a day. Um, and almost always I get over 100 words. But that way it's just you're being consistent and building that consistency. And anyone who's not familiar with the Jerry Seinfeld method, you can just look this up. Jerry Seinfeld 100 words a day, and you'll find an article or a video about it or something. I forget what the medium is, but the gist is that if you mark it off on your calendar each day that I've done at least 100 words, you are less likely to break that streak because you're like, well, I've made all this progress. And if I miss a day, is that going to throw me off? Seeing your progress charted out on a calendar like Jerry Seinfeld does can be really, really helpful in terms of keeping you motivated. We talked about compulsion versus motivation. This is the motivation side of things. That's one of the, for me anyway, it's a big motivator knowing that I've made this progress day after day after day. But also at this point in my career, I'm mature enough to not have to beat myself up about it if I don't hit even that 100 words a day. There have been several days in the last 2 weeks where I've just been so slammed and so busy doing other book related things and also family things where I haven't gotten any words done. And that's fine because we go through different seasons in life, and if we keep our eye on that goal in the distance of someday I will have lots of books out, then it's okay. In hindsight, it's okay to look back and say, well, it's okay that I didn't write on Wednesday, the 27th of November in 2015. Okay. And that date is probably wrong, but that's not the point. Point is, we don't need to beat ourselves up. What I've found on the other side of that coin, though, is that it is perfectly fine to hold ourselves accountable and to have other people hold us accountable. And so, what I do for a word count is I have a spreadsheet, a very basic spreadsheet that calculates my word count per day, per week, and per month. And then it averages it out too. And so I can look at it and see, uh, well, I wrote 30,000 words this month. And so my average was 1,000 words a day, right? That's great. That's really solid. 30,000 words in most genres is a third or sometimes even more than a third of a book. And if I can do that across 3 months, then boom, I'd probably have another book. And then there are months where it's like, well, I only got 20,000 words, or I only got 15,000 words, or then there's really good months where I've got 50,000 words in a month, or maybe even more than that. Seeing it written out is the motivator for me because I don't want there to be empty days on that spreadsheet, just like the Jerry Seinfeld calendar. But at the end of the day, I can also look at it and be positive about it because even if there are a bunch of empty days, but I still hit 30,000 words in a month, that's really great for me, depending on how my life is going.
Right.
And then if I hit more than 30,000 words, and it's 30,000 isn't like a magic number or anything. If I hit more than that, then I can look at it and say, wow, I did really well this month. Maybe I can carry that into the next month. If I'm being completely honest with everybody, it's actually the most disheartened I get is when a new month starts and then it's completely empty. It's like, oh, great, I have to do this again. Really? But I get over it after I have my first good day, my first couple good days, and I've got some word count put onto the calendar. Then it's like, okay, I can get into a rhythm, develop a rhythm, and start making some serious progress again. So all that to say, I know I ramble a lot on some of these questions, but I just want to be encouraging to everybody who's listening. Have a plan, execute it to the best of your ability. If you fall short, just pick yourself back up and then get back into it. Don't beat yourself up about it. Just keep going. Keep trying to hit it every time. And if you don't hit it, show yourself some grace. Life happens, things happen. We have to deal with these things, and that's okay. And I'll leave it there.
I like it. I like the focus on consistency. And for those that are listening or watching, Ben, said search the Jerry Seinfeld 100 words. And it's in multiple mediums. I've heard it on a Tim Ferriss podcast. He um, created a book from his podcast called Tools from Titans. And if I had long arms like Mr. Fantastic, I'd reach and grab it and pull it and show it. But
Nice.
um, it's great. It's a great principle. Focus on consistency, and things will happen. Like what you said. If you just did 100 words a day, that's 36,500 words in a year. Like that's
Yeah.
pretty good. Like
Third of a book. Yeah.
and and that's not a ton of time. Like 100 words for most people, it's less than 5 minutes of work. So the consistency over, focusing on a specific goal might be a better way to achieve your goals.
Fully agree. Fully agree.
Ben, time is kind of wrapping up. Do you have any final advice that you'd give either a new or intermediate author?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, the intermediate authors, you already know this, but new authors, finish what you start. Even if it's hot garbage, you got to finish the hot garbage, right? You got to finish it to know what you're working with. That and also finishing a project, being able to write the end or to be continued if it's a series, you gain perspective on the entire novel by finishing it or book. If you're writing nonfiction, it's the same thing. You gain perspective on the entire project as a result of finishing it. So finish what you start because that perspective will help you shape it and make it into something that could potentially someday be publishable. And for some of us, maybe that's right away. Maybe that is several years down the road. You can look at me as an example for this because some of my books I get them finished real quickly. Some of them it takes me 12 years. There's a whole wide range. There's no right way to do it. There's no prescriptive advice that I can give you to help you get through your book, except to just sit down, be consistent, and finish the thing. And then go back and fix it until it's ready to go and get that outside feedback. That's the number one piece of advice that I always give to authors is finish what you start. My second piece of advice would be pretty similar to that, but from a different angle. It's don't give up. There's a difference between finishing something and then not giving up. And when I say don't give up, I more likely mean don't give up on this thing if it's your dream. I have met authors who have been abysmal is too strong a word at writing, but not very good, we'll say. And they have worked and they have developed their craft, they have studied, they've practiced, and now they are published authors. A good friend of mine, one of my best friends in the entire world, was not abysmal. He was not even not very good. He was fine, right? He was a decent author. His name is Luke Mesa, and he's a good friend of mine. He and I met at a convention several years ago. I think it was 2017, and maybe not quite that, maybe 2019. He, at the time, I was doing a lot more freelance editing because I didn't have as many books out, and so it wasn't as easy to make as many sales at shows. Uh, and so I had to freelance edit to just get the bills paid. And so at the end of a little presentation that I gave, I said, and if anyone needs help with editing, would love to talk to you. Luke stayed after and said, yeah, I'm interested in editing. Later, he sent me his book and I was frank with him. I said, hey, look, you've got some good things going on here. There's a bunch that you should work on before you should actually pay me to edit because you just won't get your money's worth. And I gave him a list and I had done some like a sample edit for him. And to his credit, he took that information and he took those sample edits and he applied them to the rest of his book, the entirety of his first book. Then he came back to me several months later and said, how about now? I did what you said. What do you think? Do you think maybe it's worth editing now? And I looked at it and I said, yeah, we can do an edit now because he took what he did, took what I did for him, applied it, and did a good job with it. And then as I was getting through there, through his book, as I was doing his edits, I was seeing things that's like, yeah, sure, I can make some corrections here and there. Sure, he's got some weak areas, but overall, the storytelling and the characters were really, really good. And so not only did Luke take my advice and apply it, but he also had some natural ability. And everybody's natural ability is going to be different, but you can compensate for a lack of natural ability by doing hard work and being consistent. And that's what Luke did. His work was so good, uh, not I helped because I did some editing, but because Luke had done so much work on the front end that his first book ended up getting picked up by Athon Books as the first book in a three-book series. They offered him a three-book contract based on his first book, which I he wrote and I edited. And that became a 4 book contract because it ended up being a 4 book series, and all 4 books are out now. And now Luke and I are co-writing a book. That's the book that I mentioned that is launching next month, and we'll be doing publicity for it and announcements and stuff soon. But he actually just sent me his final contribution to that book today. And this is someone who started as not great, his work was fine, and who has worked over the last 6-ish years to get to a point where he is now very, very good. And I've remarked to several people since he and I started working together on this project that it's like I've got a second version of myself because we're friends, so we get along well and we share interests, and so that contributes to all this. But the quality of his writing, quality of his characters, his storytelling, his world building, like I said, it's like having a second version of myself. And so with both of us working on this project, we got this thing done in like a month and a half. And it's going to be over 100,000 words probably by the time it's done. I still have to do my part on the ending, but all that to say, regardless of where you are in your career, you can improve, you can get better. And so giving up is the only thing that will keep you from achieving dreams based on some level. Now, if we ever achieve all of our dreams, maybe someone out there can. But if I can at least grab some of my dreams that are up in the clouds and bring them down to me, that's most of what any human can ask for in this life, is to get a taste of heaven on earth. We'll put it that way. And for me, achieving my goals, achieving my dreams, that is heaven on earth for me. And if I can get some of that, that's better than getting none of it. The way you get none of it is by giving up. So don't give up.
Awesome. That's great advice. Ben, go ahead and tell people how to get a hold of you, any events that are coming up for the rest of the year, and how they can get your books.
My website is www.benwolf.com. Wolf is spelled just like the animal, WOLF. There is no E in it. Some people like to add the E. Don't add the E. So benwolf.com, that's my home base for finding out more about me. And you can also reach out to me through the contact page if you want to get a hold of me through that. My books are on Amazon. My books are on my website. If you buy them from my website, especially if they're hard copies, then I can sign and personalize them for you. And then Jeff Bezos gets no more money, which I think we can all agree is a good thing at this point. What else? I'm on Facebook. I'm on several of the other social medias too, but I spend most of my time on Facebook because I'm an old man and Facebook makes the most sense to me. Um, as far as conventions and shows, next weekend I'll be at Planet FunkCon where I'm releasing my debut graphic novel, which is actually tied to my Blood Mercenaries fantasy series. It's set in the same world, just 1,000 years earlier, and it's kid appropriate too, so worth checking out if you have young ones. And then next month, my next show is Lit RPG Con in Denver. If you're a Lit RPG fan, if you like Dungeon Crawler Carl or He Who Fights with Monsters or any of the other really big Lit RPG titles, come to that show. It is worth checking out. This is the first year we're doing it. It's already almost sold out, so get your tickets now. Big event, super huge. You get to meet some of your favorite Lit RPG authors. And then, as I mentioned, Luke and I are launching our debut Lit RPG novel there together at that event, which is why I'm trying to get it finished in time and why he was rushing to get it finished as well. So, outside of that, I've got a whole bunch of other shows coming up this year. The best place to find out information about those shows in advance is to sign up for my newsletter. There should be a link probably on my front page in one of those scrolly pasty things where you can just click on it and then hop onto my newsletter. I do mostly I that newsletter is mostly for readers, but authors, if you want to follow it to see how I do my newsletter stuff, you can. Again, I'm not purporting to be a newsletter expert, but what I can purport to be is consistent. I do a pretty good job of making sure that I get one email out per week, and more emails if something exciting is happening, like I've got a launch or a Kickstarter campaign that's ongoing. then I'll send more emails, but otherwise it's just the one email per week on average. And so that's where you can find me, and that's where you can get updated about shows and stuff is through the newsletter, through my website, and through Facebook.
Awesome, Ben. It's been a pleasure having you on today. I've learned a lot.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you for listening to the Troy Podcast. Please subscribe, like, and share with your friends.